Just briefly, there's a memo that you should have. It's dated the 26th of May, and it's from myself, and it's titled Green Building Rules for Buildings in Commercial Zones.
So again, you don't need to read it.
No.
Mark will talk you through it. Madam Chair, you won't need to find it or read it again. Yep.
By way of in conveying what's in the memo, there's a number of options that are put forward in the memo to up the standard for greener buildings and sustainability in new buildings in commercial zones and industrial zones. The memo presents options including requiring new buildings to be certified by external agencies, which Auckland Council has put in their draft. The second option is that we, rather than requiring external certification, we include standards in the district plan, and the memo has some draft standards. Now, the third option, which I'm recommending, is, and it's not set out in the memo, reflects discussions that we've had with staff in the building control section of council, but also stormwater staff. And with the introduction of these standards, there's a significant implication for processing, but also for us as staff in putting forward these standards. Essentially, there's three issues with pursuing this at the current time. The first is that to put standards in the district plan requires that there's a process to check that those standards are being complied with, and it would be the building control function of council that would need to check new building consent applications against these standards. Other councils around the country that are introducing or have standards in their district plan have specialist teams set aside in their building control function to assess applications, and at the current time we don't have that specialist team, so there's an extra resource required. Related to that is the introduction of standards, particularly for industrial zones, would be introducing requirements, not simply raising the bar from what's in the building code, but introducing requirements that don't exist in the building code at the moment. So flow rates of toilets and showers, for example. The third point I want to make is for any standards to get through this district plan review process, we need to have supporting analysis that adequately assesses the benefits and costs of those standards. And unlike the residential chapter, we haven't had the time to get that evaluation completed of what the benefits and costs are in not necessarily in financial terms, but we need to quantify what those benefits and costs are, and without that analysis the standards simply wouldn't get through the process. So as a way forward, we can investigate and look at how those issues are addressed, so we can have further discussions with the building control function of council to ascertain the extra costs of setting up a team to assess proposals like this, to assess applications against the standards, and we can also look at greater analysis to enable these provisions to be tested and taken through the process without being stopped at the first hurdle, because any decision maker on this district plan needs to be confident that staff have adequately assessed these standards and alternatives to them. To date, we just haven't had the time to do that. So
we're about to put out a district plan that will last for 10 or 15 years, and we're going to put requirements for green buildings on residential sector, but in terms of energy efficiency in the industrial and commercial sector, we're not going to put it there.
I'm suggesting that we defer it until phase 2 at the earliest. Not saying that we won't address it, but essentially there's a need for more time to have the supporting analysis, but also additional financial resource to support the building control function of council.
I think, Madam Chair, the residential approach we've put forward to you is quite straightforward. It picks up on things that you have to do for a standard house. And I think that's the difference between sort of the residential versus the commercial and industrial.
It went beyond what you have to do for a standard house.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is we've focused on those things that you have to do for a building consent anyway, but we've upped the standard to get those efficiency. Yeah. What we've found with the commercial and the industrial, there's no corresponding standard say like an insulation standard in the residential. There's no corresponding standard in the commercial and the industrial, which reflects quite a lot the nature of the wide range of commercial and industrial buildings when you think about their function. An industrial building that's a warehouse as opposed to a factory. In terms of those commercial and industrial buildings, a lot of the building consent stuff is very much more, whether it's ventilation, lighting or whatever, is more focused around health and safety of the occupants of the building rather than any energy efficiency type approach to them. So that's what we've found, is that we really would have to start from pretty much from scratch. Other councils within New Zealand are trying to do exactly the same as where we're heading with the commercial and the industrial. They've come up against the same sort of issue, and as Mark says, to make it work for commercial and industrial, you need a specialist team of technical experts in ventilation, lighting, all those sorts of things to actually assess whether something is going to meet those sustainability outcomes thereafter. So, not as easy as we had thought.
Yanni?
Did I see in here that Auckland have required it, the Green Star?
In their draft unitary plan, which is still going through a process and hasn't been to hearings, they have proposed standards, but they have, talking to our building control officials, they have a team set up to assess the building consent applications against any new standards.
Great. So they've done a lot of work around this. They would have done all the research. So we could look at what they've done. I mean, I just think we need to put it in there. I hear what you're saying, but I think, especially post-earthquake, the opportunity we have, if we don't take it now, we'll never take it as a city. And yeah, there's a bit of a cost to doing it, but it's actually, I think, an important cost that gives us a long-term benefit. And yeah, I just think we should be doing it. So, that's my view. And if we can learn from Auckland, maybe they could offer some expertise that other councils have been really good with the consenting crisis that we had. Let's work together and just get this in place now.
Just in terms of the practicality of doing it, how would it be if we put it in this one with an intent to introduce it in a year's time or something? Or is there no capacity to do that sort of thing in a district plan?
My suggestion to address the concern is that we include it in phase 2, which, to be honest with you, is months away rather than years. We're well advanced in terms of preparing phase 2 chapters. So effectively the time lag between phases 1 and 2 is not going to be years and years, it's rather going to be a year.
My other suggestion, and Councillor Johansson is quite right, we are watching what Auckland is doing, and what we'd like to do is learn from where that process gets through the hearing process and what sort of challenge the Auckland Unitary gets to this approach, because there's no point in us repeating the same mistake going down the same line if they then head into a roadblock along the line. So hence the phase 2 suggestion. Want to head down that direction. Again, it's one of those, we're not sure we've got the mechanism right, and we certainly definitely haven't got the supporting structure around it to make it work. And I say that particularly at the moment when the building consent team is under considerable pressure already, and we need to be very wary of the district plan imposing additional costs or time on that process at the moment.
The difficulty is that a whole lot of new buildings are being built, yes. And I don't want to get into the situation where you get like a hospital boiler emitting coal for the next 40 years because ECAN permits it, in terms of the new buildings that are going. So we're building entire industrial parks out the southwest. I'd quite like them to actually be energy efficient. It's sensible for the landowner, it's sensible for the building owner, it's sensible for the tenant. We know the payback period is quite brief. We're in fact putting money into it through some of that work that Cafe was doing, and ECA's putting money into it. Is there any other... You're saying that we haven't got sufficient robustness about our process yet to be able to potentially withstand any challenge. So if we do it now, our chances of getting it through are not as high as if we delay it. realistically, I'm happy to go with the delay, even though I hate it.
Disagree. Yeah.
Because it just seems so bloody obvious that. But I appreciate that the process of a district plan review, especially this one, will not necessarily be obvious and logical. Yeah. So, just will we realistically have enough information within 6 months when we come back to do this to be able to do that?
Given what we've achieved in the first phase, I'm confident that we can have sufficient supporting analysis to support these provisions. I should say I agree with what's being put forward and the concerns you're raising. It's just that as a professional, I'd like to have confidence that they'll survive the light of day and that they won't be thrown out in the absence of analysis, and subject to being complemented by the resourcing of our building consents team.
Is there any way that we can offer incentives? For example, you get your building consent, go immediately to the top of the pile if you're a 6-star green building. Is that completely against all rules, is it?
Well, it's slightly outside the district plan.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that,
and I think that raises the issue is that for some things, a regulatory response actually mightn't quite be the right thing to do all the time. It might be right at a particular time, and we're just saying at the moment we don't think the regulatory response is the right thing to do at this stage. Yep. Yeah, that's fine. Correct. And I think when we can bring it back to you, Madam Chair, it would be more in a thoughtful way and a comprehensive way, which actually brings together the other work that Council is doing through the non-regulatory, our building consent people and ourselves, to actually show you how the whole thing would work as a package so it's understood and sensible.
The fact that some chapters go through this time and other chapters go through next time, is it actually okay to put it again in the next round?
Certainly there's aspects of the commercial chapter, for example, New Brighton, which is being dealt with in phase 2.
Yes.
Like, the frustration I have is that we did all this work for the Central City Plan. We've done all this analysis. We've spent a huge amount of staff time looking at tools and methods to get green buildings in the city post-earthquake. So I cannot understand why we don't have the information. I mean, we've done a huge amount of work. So, council staff, consultants, we spent $12 million doing a Central City Plan that had a huge amount of analysis over different options, and green buildings was one of the key things that we looked at. So, the concern I have with putting stuff into phase 2, we have no certainty about timeframes for phase 2. We have no certainty of process for phase 2. We have no agreement with government over how this whole process is going to end up. So anything we defer now, I think realistically we have to think, the chance of it happening within the next year is pretty remote.
No. As far as we're concerned, whether we get the truncated process or not, we are continuing on with the second phase of the district plan review, and if we don't get the truncated process, then we will go down a Schedule 1 straight RMA process. So from our point of view, so that would be this time next year. So we're looking to do phase 1, notification within the next month or so, and then the next phase would be, that's correct. So,
Take us through that timeline. So this one comes into effect the end of this year?
So if decisions are made on this first phase, then those will have effect and come into being at the end of this year, and then the same would apply for the next phase 2. It would be the end of next year.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah. I think those processes, those timelines are fairly certain. I think.
Just briefly on the draft Central City Plan, there were provisions included and there was work done to develop what's called a base tool, which but there was the supporting analysis required for the Central City Recovery Plan. It wasn't, if you think of the bar being here for supporting analysis of the recovery plan under the Ordering Council or even under the RMA, the bar is much higher, and so we need to robustly assess the alternatives and costs and benefits of that, which wasn't done as part of the Central City Plan.
Of increasing the bar slightly at this stage and then a bit more on the second stage? Just sort of incremental creep. I'm learning from the malls.
In the current draft, any developments over 250 square metres triggers the need for an urban design assessment as part of the assessment matters for that, as well as in the policies. There's consideration given to the extent to which sustainable outcomes are achieved through energy efficiency and so forth. So that already does feature in the assessment at the moment.
If it's over 200 metres, so that would be practically agreed.
So it's part of that assessment, broader assessment.
Okay. That's the bit I would worry about, the urban design component. No, I'm not worried about it. That's the bit I fear for in the district plan, personally.
So I guess that's a call we have to make. But
I'm just wondering if there's some, because personally I do fear for it in the district plan, not because it shouldn't be there, because it definitely should, but just because of the process it will go through. Is there any of those things that we desperately want included, that could come into a process that isn't called urban design? It's probably an unfair question just to throw at you, but I think it's something we need to consider.
I think regardless of where we start in terms of raising the bar, we're still, the same level of analysis is required. So whether we raise the bar just a small amount, you still need to have the supporting costs and benefits.
Okay.
You remember with the residential, we brought to you a whole cost-benefit analysis, and we're able to tell you within 18 months it's paid off. We can't do the same for this work at all.
Okay. Okay. Well, I can live with 1 year. Yanni can't. What about the rest of you?
Yeah.
You're okay? Yeah? You've relaxed? I'm not seeing intense body language, so I'm assuming it's okay. No. But not...
Realistic, perhaps.
Resigned, I think.
Resigned.